At some point early in the pandemic, Caroline Winchell, and if you don't know her, she's a former board president here, and she was the singer on that side, far to your left, our left, when we're watching that video. Early in the pandemic, she stopped by to visit with me and my partner Kai on our porch in West Philadelphia with her then baby, Ellis. And Ellis was a big, sturdy chonk of a baby with the beginnings of curls at the back of his head and an observant expression. He wasn't exactly a grumpy baby, nor was he a particularly smiley baby. He was crawling but not walking, and he spent our short visit crawling across our porch furniture and across his mom, and then being pulled back by Caroline. I remember specifically him flopping down and her grabbing his legs and yanking him back before he fell over. And then he would crawl again. He would crawl on top of Caroline. He would go exploring again. And the two of them seemed so at ease with each other. Caroline would carry on a conversation with us while catching Ellis before he toppled off the seat, and Ellis would climb up on Caroline when he got hungry and reach for nourishment. They seemed like they belonged together, like they belonged to one another. And what I noticed most that day was that Ellis acted as though Caroline's body was an extension of his own. I was not a parent yet at that point, but I knew from friends and family who were parents that one's child's sense of ownership over your body when you are their parent is both a gift and a challenge. From the mother of twins, friends. It's hard to get personal space or a moment away from one's child sometimes, and it takes work to teach children how to respect another's body, probably especially their own parents' bodies. But there's also baby snuggles, and there's moments where your little one runs and jumps into your arms. There's times when your teenager rests their head on your shoulder when you're watching a movie. A friend recently said that watching a parent or a caregiver with a child reminded them how much care they needed when they were young. Each of us were taken care of like this, my friend said while watching our baby Nova and my partner Kai. We each needed so much attention from so many people to become who we are. And yet most of us know that this is more complicated than it sounds. Right? Each of us received countless hours of feeding and diaper changes and play from our parents when we were little. But our needs became more complicated as we grew, and many of us didn't receive enough care or the right kind of care from those who were responsible for us. Some of us were harmed by those who were supposed to keep us safe. And so Mother's Day today is a challenging day for many. There are some of us who are easily able to celebrate strong and healthy relationships with our mothers who are still alive, and there's others of us who hold baggage and pain and trauma in our relationships with our mothers. Hallmark makes some of us feel invisible on this day if we are queer and our children don't have a mother, or if we are raised by a single parent or by a grandparent or other caregivers, or if our story includes the complexities of miscarriage or stillbirth or sometimes abortion. Today is a day of silent grief for many whose mothers or whose children have passed away. And for those who wanted to become parents but didn't, or those whose story of foster parents or adoptive parents doesn't fit neatly within the Happy Mother's Day one-dimensional signs that are emblazoned across storefronts and across the top of every brunch menu in the United States today. So my friends, if you are one of the many who has a complicated relationship with motherhood, I want to say that you are not alone here today, and that your story is honored here, though maybe not on those brunch menus. And that you are welcome here whatever grief or baggage or sadness or fury you are wearing today. And if you come here today feeling rage and defeat at the pending Supreme Court decision that will take away the federal guarantee of the right to choose whether or not one becomes a parent, you are surrounded by those who feel similarly to you. Can I get an amen, friends? And if you have an easy relationship to motherhood, you too are welcome here today, and I hope today is a day of celebration for you. My friends, our country needs us today and every day to be a day where we bring into the world some nurture and some kindness and some fierce justice advocacy for that all good mothers know how to offer for children and for each other. Can I get an amen? No one is more sentimentalized in America than mothers on Mother's Day, writes Anne Lamott, and no one is more often blamed for the culture's bad people and bad behavior. She is a mother and a grandmother who hates Mother's Day, by the way. What I know is that this is technically my second Mother's Day as a mother, although I was so sleep-deprived with a newborn on my first Mother's Day, I have no memory of it at all. Sorry for anyone who was nice to me on Mother's Day. I don't remember. What I do remember is telling my partner, Kai, after that short pandemic porch visit from Caroline and Ellis a few years ago, that I wanted the kind of relationship that I saw between Caroline and Ellis. I'm sure I naively said something to Kai like, I'm sure it's exhausting and I'm sure it's like really hard, but it looks great. I wanted a little being to feel like I belonged to them, like I was an extension of them, like I was theirs. I didn't so much want a baby who belonged to me, I wanted to belong to a baby. And of course, none of us can ever predict what experiences will actually feel like when we come to actually experience them, but what is true for me is that being a parent is far, far more difficult than I ever thought it would be. I've never felt as irretrievably out of control as I do as a parent. Can I get an amen? Any of the other parents who feel like that? I'm the kind of person who has never once ridden my bike down a hill without my feet or my hands on the brakes. Never once in my 41 years. I don't particularly like surprises or risk, even like in a safe way. Like, I don't watch thrillers. I have mixed feelings about roller coasters. Like, do I really need to spend my time doing that? I have a hard time being fully present in my body because it can feel really vulnerable to be fully present in my body. It has been said that becoming a parent is to have your heart go walking around outside of your body, to have your heart go walking around outside of you. And before I was a parent, I understood this to mean that you love your children so much that it can feel vulnerable when they're out in the world. And I knew how to love before I was a parent. You don't have to be a parent to know how to love. And I have lost those I loved. And so I understood how giving our love to another makes us feel vulnerable. Watching Caroline and Ellis that day, I wanted to belong to a child and for them to feel completely safe and confident with me, for them to trust that I will give them nourishment when I need it and that I will be there for them always. I wanted them to feel like my body was an extension of theirs. And what I didn't realize was that for me, becoming a parent also meant that my child's body would feel like an extension of mine. I know this isn't an experience of all parents, and it's become less acute for me as my child Nova grows. But early on, when Nova would cry, I would feel it almost like screaming in my own body. If we were at the dinner table and someone asked me to pass the salt while Nova was crying, I would snap. I would react to them as if they were asking me to pass the salt while I was screaming, I'm in pain. Early in his life, his helplessness would feel like my helplessness. Not because as a parent I didn't know how to help him, although there were lots of moments like that too, but because I felt like his feelings were happening to me. His confusion was my confusion. His vulnerability was my vulnerability. And newborn babies have a lot of confusion and vulnerability and helplessness. All of the work I have done in my life to become resilient and self-sufficient and minimize my own helplessness, all of the work I've done to protect the parts of me that are vulnerable, to keep myself from pain, all of that work suddenly felt like it had been stripped away when I had a child. All of my coping mechanisms for discomfort were suddenly inadequate to the huge feelings of this little being in front of me, who is of me, still feels like he's part of me even now that he's a little over a year old. My heart living outside my body with the communication and self-care skills of an infant. And I know that many parents either don't feel quite as profoundly unseated as I did upon becoming parents, or they find a way to take it in their stride more quickly than I did. And I know that there's some parents who struggle a lot more than I have. It feels important to also say that Nova is a 28-pound joy factory. And I have smiled and laughed more this past year of him being alive than I've ever smiled or laughed before. I think around 100 times a day I tell him I love him. I kiss his chubby cheeks and hold his warm, sleeping body, and I watch him learn new things and chase our cats, and it's the best. I chose parenthood, and I love it, and I wouldn't change my choice. But parenthood can feel like riding my bike down a hill when I don't know how to ride a bike, so even worse than my current life. And that there are no brakes at all, let alone that I don't have my hands or feet on the brakes. After a lifetime of avoiding that kind of risk in order to keep myself feeling grounded, it has been hard. It has been hard. And though it's gotten better for me the longer I've been a parent, I understand that to some degree this is probably part of how I'm going to feel about Nova for the rest of my life, for the rest of both of our lives. And though I had a fairly uncomplicated pregnancy was hard. It was hard to go through so much change at once, to have so much discomfort, to face so many limitations to my way of moving and being. And at some point when I was pregnant, it hit me in a way that it had never hit me before, that no one should have to experience pregnancy unless they choose it. Can I get an amen? Amen. I chose it and I wanted it, and I am a queer person, and so it was hard work to make it happen. But even for me, it was incredibly challenging. And now that I'm a mom, I feel exponentially more strongly that no one should have to be a parent unless they choose it. Can I get an amen? The actual quote from Elizabeth Stone that I titled today's service after, not just the heart outside your body, but her quote is, "Making the decision to have a child is momentous. It's to decide forever to have your heart go around walking outside of your body." Making the decision to have a child. Choosing. This week, a leaked draft opinion from the Supreme Court gave us all a preview that they are planning on essentially overturning Roe v. Wade, the 1973 ruling that federally guaranteed the right to reproductive choice, the right to abortion for people in this country who have uteruses. And what we know is that, in the words of my colleague, Reverend Nancy McDonald Ladd, that when reproductive choice is severely curtailed or outlawed, in every case across literally all of human history in every political context, people with uteruses, young girls and women and non-binary people and trans men die. People with uteruses die when there is not reproductive choice. And our faith tells us that our bodies and the choices that we make about them are sacred. When I read the news Tuesday morning, everything felt like it was sinking within me. I felt defeated and sad, disbelieving and furious, powerless, and afraid for myself and for so many people in this country. In so many ways, though the federal legal right to abortion has existed for nearly 50 years, I also know that abortion access has been reduced and reduced and reduced over and over in that time. And though urban, middle-class, white women in progressive areas, which is a descriptor of me, have decent abortion access, maybe, certainly many, maybe most, poor people and rural people and people in conservative areas and Black and Indigenous and other people of color have dramatically limited access to abortions already, particularly surgical abortions. And so while the right to reproductive choice has technically existed now for almost 50 years, for a long time that has meant very little to many people in this country. Rights and access are not the same thing. Reproductive rights and reproductive justice are not the same thing. And most of us have known that this was coming. We've known that overturning Roe v. Wade has been a key goal of conservatives for a very long time. And basically, since Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away, we have known that the balance of the court would guarantee that this week would come. The Unitarian Universalist Side with Love campaign reminded us this week that since well before Roe v. Wade, our people of our faith, Unitarian Universalists, have declared unequivocally that we support every person's right to make decisions about their own bodies and reproductive health, including the choice to seek abortion care. Throughout the 20th and 21st centuries, UUs have supported movements working to make abortion accessible and affordable and to destigmatize abortion in our society. In this faith tradition, we know that our bodies and the choices we make about them are sacred. That abortion can be a sacred choice. We also know that pregnant people have been seeking and providing abortion care to one another for hundreds of thousands of years. Self-managing an abortion at home with abortion pills is now an extremely safe and effective method for most people. And reproductive justice leaders are reminding us that this method will likely be available through most of the country through unofficial means, right? Through out-of-country pharmacies and networks of care. That probably will not go away. The risk will be less of a medical risk and more a risk of imprisonment going forward. Banning abortion will simply make it more difficult for people, especially poor and rural and Black and Indigenous and other people of color, to obtain surgical abortions safely and legally. We are reminded that the conversation about abortion and reproductive rights has always been about Christian nationalism and misogyny and white supremacy. It's about control and power. It's not about babies, because if it was about babies, then this kind of action would be paired with laws guaranteeing excellent and free prenatal care and labor and delivery services, right? If it was about babies, affordable childcare and universal pre-K and after-school programming would be available to all, right? If it was about babies, lactation consulting and generous paid parental leave and reality-based sex ed and the establishment of a social safety network to eliminate poverty would be real, right? This is not about loving babies. This is about controlling people. This is about controlling people with uteruses, controlling Black and Indigenous and other people of color. It's about controlling poor people. It's about controlling rural people, people in conservative areas, queer and trans people. That's what this is about.
That's right. That's right.
This is about creating a conservative Christian state. Something like 1 out of 4 women and other people with uteruses will have an abortion in their lifetimes. And something like 60 to 70% of people seeking an abortion are already mothers. Overturning Roe v. Wade will have devastating impacts on mothers and on children. But the fight is far from over, beloveds. Every popular poll shows that the overwhelming majority of Americans support the right to safe and legal abortion, though that the justices who supported this ruling were majority appointed by presidents who didn't win the popular vote. The reproductive justice movement is powerful and mobilized and will be growing in power now. Our Unitarian Universalist faith affirms that all of our bodies are sacred and that we are each endowed with the twin gifts of agency and conscience. Each of us should have the power to decide what does and does not happen with our bodies at every moment of our lives, because consent and bodily autonomy are holy. This is what the Side with Love campaign reminds us this week. When disparities in resources or freedoms make it more difficult for certain groups of people to exercise autonomy over their bodies, our faith compels us to take liberatory action. And so we have work to do, my friends. On Tuesday morning, I felt sunken and defeated, and then I reminded myself that there is work for us to do, right? We must act. Today, we are going to be sharing our plate with a Pennsylvania abortion fund. I hope many of you will give generously to that and to other similar reproductive justice causes. We need to continue to offer reality-based sex ed here in church if our schools aren't going to do it, right? This fall, we'll be offering OWL for 7th to 9th grade youth here in this church. If you want to know how you can help offer developmentally appropriate, reality-based sex ed to children and people of all ages, I would encourage you to come talk to Reverend Hannah at some point, because we have that as a curriculum in our faith tradition. We need to continue to do work to eliminate economic injustice and racial injustice, to eliminate healthcare disparity between Black and Indigenous and other people of color and white people. And we must continue to work for the vote. We must continue to vote ourselves and work with campaigns like You the Vote and with Power, one of our interfaith justice coalitions, to help mobilize votes right now. Because boy, is it going to matter. It matters in the midterms. It's going to matter in November. And this is a congregation that has a history of working to help other people get their votes heard. We will be doing that here in this congregation. My friends, motherhood, parenthood is complex. There's baggage, there's pain, there's trauma, there's grief. There's also love and meaning and some of the most deeply precious memories and experiences one can have in this world. But no one should have to be pregnant. No one should have to be a parent. When disparities in resources or freedoms make it more difficult for certain groups of people to exercise autonomy over their own bodies, our faith compels us to take liberatory action. My friends, will you join me? Will you join me, friend? Virtual congregation, will you join me? Type into the chat, yes. Thank you. Thank you. What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when a person with a uterus takes power? We rise above, we lead with love, we will win. We've just begun. May it be so, and amen.
Hi, I'm Reverend Hannah Capaldi.
And I'm Reverend Abbey Tennis. We are the ministers at the First Unitarian Church of Philadelphia, where our mission is to awaken love and justice in our lives and in the world.
We're so grateful that you watched, and we hope that the sermon connected with your soul.
We also want to invite you to join us for a live worship service every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. You can always find the link to that service on our website at www.philauu.org. In these services, you'll hear words like you've just heard, And you also get a chance to greet one another, pray together, sing together. And we even hold a virtual coffee hour after services to get a chance to greet some new and old friends.
If you want to support the mission of this community and you feel moved to give, you can do so by going to the website that Reverend Abbey just mentioned. You can find that link below, or you can text 215-709-5095 and follow the prompts to give.
If someone in your life needs to hear these words today, we encourage you to share this video. And again, thank you so much for watching.
We hope to see you soon.